Israeli troops fatally shot a Palestinian man and wounded at least 13 others Friday morning on the Gaza side of the enclave's border with Israel, and each side accused the other of violating a ceasefire that took effect Wednesday night. The shooting was the first flare-up of violence since a truce reached late Wednesday ended 8 days of Israeli bombardment of Gaza and Palestinian rocket attacks against Israel, fighting that drove the two sides to the brink of all-out war. Palestinian witnesses and human rights officials said the episode illustrated the ambiguities of the deal, which called for an examination of the safeguards along a fenced 300-meter-wide buffer zone that Israel enforces on the Gaza side of the border, as well as negotiations on ending Israel's blockade of the territory. The Israeli bombardment pulverized government buildings and militant weapons stores, along with many homes and shops, leaving 161 Palestinians dead. But the Gaza Strip's Hamas leadership has emerged stronger than ever, Palestinians in Gaza said Thursday. Hamas, along with the masked fighters of other Gaza militant groups, held boisterous victory rallies across the Gaza Strip on Thursday, the day after the Egypt-brokered ceasefire with Israel was announced. Amid parades of flags and political bombast, each of the Strip's militant factions hailed what they called a triumph for the Palestinian resistance and a new era for Palestinian unity. But the separate public appearances by each militant group, rather than one unified rally, raised questions about the sturdiness of the ceasefire. Anwar Abdelhadi, 20, was killed when Israeli forces on the border opened fire on a few dozen mostly young men as they approached the first of two fences Friday morning, according to hospital officials and witnesses in the southern Gaza town of Khan Younis. The Israeli military said hundreds of Palestinians had attempted to breach the border fence in several places Friday, prompting Israeli soldiers to shoot at them. Some of the wounded said they had come to see the situation along the border, after learning from local news reports that the old border zone restrictions had been lifted. People were saying it's okay to go to the fence now, and that there were no Jews there, said Mahmoud Abiutaim, 19, who was shot in the abdomen. The area along the border where Abiutaim lives is populated mostly with farmers and a small Bedouin community. Some came to take pictures, he said. Others had tried to climb the fence or remove pieces of it, he said. Captain Eaton Buckman, an Israeli military spokesman, said at least 300 Palestinians demonstrated and tried to cross the border at a number of places along the southern frontier between the Gaza Strip and Israel. He said Israeli soldiers initially fired warning shots in the air in an attempt to deter the Palestinians. When they continued their attempts to cross, security forces followed standard procedure and after exhausting other options fired towards their lower bodies, he said. Anwar was trying to put a Hamas flag on the fence, Omer Katif, the relative of the young man who was killed, told Reuters news agency. The army fired 3 times into the air, Katif said, then shot his relative in the head after he shouted a slogan in support of a Hamas militant leader who was killed in an Israeli airstrike last week. The situation underscored different interpretations on each side of the border of the vague terms outlined in Wednesday's brief ceasefire agreement. The ceasefire said that people can move and work with no buffer zone, said Khalil Abiy Shamra, who heads the Adamar human rights organization in Gaza. Israeli officials said they remain committed to the ceasefire but have not disclosed whether or when negotiations on security procedures along the border will be held. Israeli military spokeswoman Avril Leibovich tweeted a photo Friday of a few dozen Palestinians, some of them teenagers, who she said were throwing rocks at the border. Buckman said Israel considered the attempted breach a violation of the ceasefire deal that Hamas and Israel reached Wednesday but did not say whether the military would take further action. Ahmad Mohammed, a hospital administrator who admitted 7 of the wounded to Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis, said citizens consider the Israeli shooting a breach as well. No matter the situation, it shouldn't have resulted in killing, he said. But he said he did not believe that the incident would seriously threaten the ceasefire. Hamas hasn't decided to respond to the Israeli breaching of the agreement, but we hope that such violations won't be committed again, Hamas spokesman Sami Abu Zuhri said in a statement emailed to reporters. He said Hamas reported the incident to Egypt, which was instrumental in arranging the truce.